The police officers heard the soul-wrenching howl of a service dog under the bridge. "What they found will make you cry." The autumn wind whispered through the empty streets of Cedar Grove, bringing with it a sense of sadness, as if it were enveloping the trees that had already lost their vibrant colors. They swayed slightly in the wind, casting long, eerie shadows on the sidewalks. Officer Mike Thompson drove along familiar roads, the quiet hum of his patrol car blending with the occasional creaking of old signs. Even the silence seemed deafening. Rex had been by Mike's side during countless hours on duty, sniffing out drugs, tracking down suspects, and always covering Mike's back. He was more than just a partner. He was a friend, a confidant, and most importantly, family. The pain of loss hadn't faded. Time hadn't softened it. Mike tried to distract himself with work, pulling the same shifts, responding to the same calls, but nothing could fill the void left by Rex. Every time he stepped into the station, the emptiness inside him grew. His office still carried the scent of Rex's dog shampoo, a painful reminder that his partner was never coming back. No more wagging tail when Mike walked through the door. No more impatient paws tapping on the floor, eager for the next adventure. That night, the silence was unbearable. The city's calm only deepened the loneliness that Mike had come to accept as part of his life. The radio in his patrol car crackled, but Mike paid no attention. His gaze was fixed on the road, though his thoughts had drifted to memories. Memories of Rex, of how he would quietly nudge Mike's hand while sitting beside him after a long shift. His eyes filled with understanding. "Just you and me, buddy," Mike often whispered into the silence. But tonight, his voice felt empty. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound in the car as Mike drove down Cedar Grove's main street. His eyes flicked to the dashboard clock, 2:45 a.m. The city slept. The streets were empty, and it seemed like nothing could disturb the peace of this night. But as the patrol car passed over the old bridge at Johnson Creek, something caught his attention. A faint noise, barely distinguishable over the low hum of the engine. It was a moan, a quiet, desperate cry. Mike's heart clenched for a moment. He thought it might just be the wind. He had heard similar sounds in the stillness of the night before. But this was different. This wasn't the wind. This moan was filled with pain. It wasn't the soft meowing of a stray cat or the rustling of an animal searching for food. It was a cry that sounded as though it came from something that had suffered for far too long. Mike's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he slowed down. His instincts, sharpened by years on the force, kicked in. He had been trained to listen to the world around him, to notice the smallest details others might overlook. The cry persisted, weak but insistent, growing louder as he neared the bridge. A chill ran down his spine, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Pulling over to the side of the road, Mike killed the engine. His eyes scanned the area carefully. The bridge was old, its stone pillars crumbling in places. But for Mike, it had always been a place of solitude, where he could clear his head after a long shift. Tonight, however, an ominous presence seemed to linger here. Stepping out of the patrol car, Mike felt the cold air pierce through him like a blade. The wind cut through his uniform, but he didn't care. His focus was entirely on the sound, the cry that still echoed in the distance. The beam of his flashlight swept across the area, but the darkness was impenetrable, as if the night itself was trying to conceal what lay hidden in the shadows. As he descended the embankment, Mike finally saw the source of the sound. His breath caught in his throat. The beam of his flashlight illuminated a figure beneath the bridge. There, curled up around 5 tiny puppies, lay a dog. The scene before him was both heartbreaking and familiar. Her eyes, large and filled with fear, met his as he stepped closer. But unlike most animals in distress, she didn't growl or try to run. Instead, there was a quiet understanding in her gaze, as if she knew Mike meant no harm. Mike reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers brushed against the edge of his phone. He needed to act fast. His mind raced through possible options. The local animal shelter was too far, and they likely wouldn't have the resources to help in the middle of the night. But he knew one person who could. "Dispatcher, this is Officer Thompson," Mike said into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "I have a situation under the Johnson Creek Bridge. I need Dr. Sarah Chun here immediately. We have an injured dog with 5 puppies. We can't do this without her." There was a pause on the other end, then a raspy response. "Copy that, Officer Thompson. I'll contact Dr. Chun right away." Mike glanced back at the mother dog. She had lowered her head onto the concrete, her body trembling with exhaustion. She was holding on, but not for much longer. She was injured. The puppies needed urgent medical care. "I'll stay with them until you arrive," Mike said into the radio before switching it off. He took a few steps back. The last thing he wanted was to frighten the mother, but she needed help. He couldn't leave her out here in the cold. His thoughts returned to Rex, to the loyalty Rex had shown him without question, without hesitation. That loyalty had always touched Mike to his core. But as he looked at this mother dog now, he realized something important. The loyalty Rex had given him wasn't unique. It was a bond shared by all who were willing to care for and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The mother dog shifted slightly, her eyes never leaving Mike. Slowly, he crouched down, making his movements careful and deliberate. He didn't want to startle her, especially with her puppies so vulnerable. "Don't be afraid, girl," Mike whispered, his voice barely rising above the wind. "We're going to help you. You and your puppies. You're going to be okay." The dog seemed to relax slightly. Her body remained tense, but no longer frozen with fear. It was a small but significant sign of trust. Mike could only hope that trust wouldn't be misplaced. He wasn't a vet. He didn't know what injuries this mother had endured, but he was determined to help. In the distance, faint sirens broke the silence, growing louder as Dr. Sarah Chun's vehicle approached. Mike exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The worst was over. But for this mother and her puppies, the journey was just beginning. As the sirens drew closer, Mike remained still, his gaze locked on the mother and her puppies. The wind howled under the bridge, threading between them, as if whispering its own sorrow. The mother's breathing was weak, her body sagging, but she remained a protective barrier. Her eyes never left Mike. He wasn't sure if it was the cold or the fear for her puppies that had drained her strength. But one thing was clear: she wouldn't make it on her own. The sound of the sirens seemed to pull Mike back from the depths of his thoughts. He checked the time. Nearly 5 minutes had passed since he called dispatch. His heart pounded as headlights pierced through the darkness. It was Dr. Sarah Chun, just as he'd hoped. Finally, help had arrived. A vehicle pulled up a few yards from Mike's patrol car. Dr. Chun stepped out, her eyes immediately scanning the area. "Mike, where are they?" she called, her voice filled with urgent determination. Mike shone his flashlight toward the base of the bridge. "Here, Dr. Chun," he called back. "The mother dog and her 5 puppies. She's hurt. I don't know what happened, but they need help now." Dr. Chun nodded, striding forward with the steady confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Her medical bag swayed slightly as she knelt beside Mike. There was a quiet reassurance in her presence, an unspoken promise that everything would be okay. The weight of the situation, the mother dog, now aware of the new presence, slightly turned but did not move away from her puppies. Dr. Chun slowly leaned down, her voice soft and soothing, extending her hand to assess the dog's condition. "Hey, sweet girl," she whispered. "I'm here to help. Everything will be all right. Mike stepped aside, allowing Dr. Chun to work. His eyes kept shifting from the mother dog to the puppies. They were so small, barely more than a few weeks old, their tiny bodies shivering from the cold. Their fragile forms clung together for survival. Dr. Chun carefully moved the mother's body, revealing the puppies hidden beneath her. The smallest of them, a little girl, was struggling to breathe, her tiny chest rising and falling with effort. The doctor frowned as she examined the mother's injuries. Deep gashes on her side, a broken leg, and several bruises that had yet to heal. The damage wasn't just physical. The mother was mentally and emotionally drained. She had spent days protecting her babies, enduring unimaginable hardship. "She's been through hell," Dr. Chun murmured, her voice filled with sorrow. "But she's still holding on," Mike said, his throat tightening. "We need to get her to the clinic," Dr. Chun replied. Mike nodded, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had been on many rescue missions, seen trauma, loss, and suffering, but nothing compared to this. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a battle for survival, a race against time. And time was running out. Dr. Chun carefully started moving the mother dog onto a stretcher. The puppies stirred, letting out soft whimpers as they instinctively reached for their mother. One by one, Dr. Chun gently lifted them and placed them in the carrier she had brought. Mike's hands trembled as he helped her, his eyes fixed on the tiny creatures. "Do you think they'll make it?" he asked quietly. Dr. Chun didn't answer right away. Instead, she checked each puppy's vital signs, lost in thought. Her brow was furrowed, but there was a glimmer of hope in her expression. "We'll do everything we can," she finally said, her voice firm despite the grim circumstances. "The mother is in critical condition, but she's strong. She's survived so much and she's still fighting. As for the puppies, we'll see. They're weak, but if we get them to the clinic in time, they have a chance." Mike swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in his throat. The whole scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie, impossible to witness without pain. And yet, it was real. These dogs, this mother, were right in front of him, fighting for their lives in a world that had already treated them so cruelly. Dr. Chun finished securing the mother dog and her puppies on the stretcher. She looked at Mike, determination burning in her eyes. "Let's get them to the clinic," she said. "We can't waste any time." Mike nodded. His chest tightened with a mix of emotions: hope, fear, and a quiet sorrow that wouldn't let go. He watched as Dr. Chun carefully lifted the stretcher, and together, they carried the fragile family toward the car. As they passed by the bridge, Mike instinctively glanced back at the spot where this helpless family had been abandoned. At that moment, he realized this wasn't just an animal rescue. It was redemption. The bond between humans and animals wasn't just about companionship. It was about trust, loyalty, and the silent promise to never abandon each other. As Dr. Chun and Mike gently loaded the injured mother and her puppies into the car, Mike's thoughts drifted away from the urgency of the moment. His gaze lingered on the mother dog. Her body was battered, but she still fiercely protected her puppies. The soft whimpers of the little ones echoed in his head, stirring memories he had tried to bury. Memories of a time when his only partner was his service dog, Rex. Mike's mind drifted back to those days, when he and Rex had been inseparable. Their bond had been unbreakable. It felt as if Rex was still with him, that old, familiar presence filling the emptiness in his chest. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he drove through the dark streets of Cedar Grove, but his thoughts were far away. It had been nearly 6 months since Rex was gone, yet their partnership remained fresh in Mike's heart. They had met when Mike had just graduated from the academy, eager to prove himself as a police officer. Rex had been the department's most reliable service dog, a highly trained German shepherd with sharp instincts and an even sharper mind. Mike had quickly bonded with him. Their connection had gone beyond a simple working relationship. They had been brothers in arms, understanding each other without words. The first few days without Rex had been unbearable. Mike had thrown himself into his work, but nothing could bring him the same sense of peace as his partner had. And now, even after all this time, he could still hear him. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily as the mother dog, now aware of the new presence, turned slightly but did not move away from her puppies. Dr. Chun slowly leaned in, her voice gentle and soothing as she reached out to assess the dog's condition. "Hey, sweet girl," she whispered. "I'm here to help. Everything's going to be okay." Mike stepped back, allowing Dr. Chun to work. His eyes kept drifting from the mother dog to her puppies. They were so small, barely more than a few weeks old. Their tiny bodies trembled from the cold as they huddled together for survival. Dr. Chun carefully shifted the mother dog's body, revealing the puppies nestled beneath her. The smallest one, a little female, was struggling to breathe, her tiny chest rising and falling with effort. The doctor frowned as she examined the mother's wounds. Deep gashes along her side, a broken leg, and several bruises that had yet to heal. But the damage wasn't just physical. The mother was exhausted, mentally drained. "She's been through hell," Dr. Chun murmured, her voice filled with sorrow. "But she's holding on. Let's get her to the clinic," Mike said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on his shoulders. He had seen rescues before, witnessed trauma, grief, and loss. But nothing compared to this. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a fight for survival, a battle against time. And time, he knew, was running out. Dr. Chun carefully began to move the mother dog onto a stretcher. The puppies stirred, letting out soft whimpers as they sensed their mother being moved. One by one, Dr. Chun lifted them, placing them into the carrier she had brought. Mike's hands trembled as he carefully assisted her, his gaze fixed on the fragile lives in front of him. "Do you think they'll make it?" he asked quietly. Dr. Chun didn't answer right away. Instead, she checked each puppy's vital signs, her brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, it seemed as though she was lost in thought, weighing the possibilities. Her forehead remained creased with concern, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We'll do everything we can," she finally said, her voice steady despite the grim circumstances. "The mother's in critical condition, but she's strong. She's been through so much, yet she keeps fighting. As for the puppies, we'll see. They're weak, but if we get them to the clinic in time, they have a chance." Mike swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. Everything about this felt surreal, like a scene from a movie too painful to watch. And yet, it was real. These dogs, the mother and her puppies, were right in front of him, fighting for survival in a world that had already been so cruel to them. Dr. Chun finished securing the mother and her puppies onto the stretcher. She looked at Mike, her eyes filled with determination. "Let's get them to the clinic," she said. "We don't have time to waste." Mike nodded, his chest tightening with a mix of emotions: hope, fear, and a quiet sadness that refused to let go. As they carefully lifted the wounded mother and her puppies into the car, Mike couldn't help but glance back at the bridge, the spot where this fragile family had been abandoned. And in that moment, he realized this was more than just a rescue. This was redemption. The bond between humans and animals was more than just survival. It was about trust, loyalty, and the silent promise to never abandon one another. As Dr. Chun and Mike carefully loaded the injured mother and her puppies into the car, Mike's thoughts drifted away from the urgency of the moment. His gaze lingered on the mother dog, her body battered and exhausted, yet her protective instincts unwavering. The soft whimpers of the puppies echoed in his mind, stirring memories he had tried to forget. Memories of a time when his only partner was his service dog, Rex. Mike's mind traveled back to those days, when he and Rex had been inseparable, their bond unbreakable. It felt as if Rex was still with him, his presence lingering like a familiar shadow. It had been nearly 6 months since Rex was gone, yet the memories of their partnership remained fresh in Mike's heart. They had met when Mike had just graduated from the academy, eager to prove himself as an officer. Rex had been the department's best service dog, a highly trained German shepherd with sharp instincts and an even sharper sense of loyalty. Mike had bonded with him quickly. Their connection went beyond just work. They were brothers in arms, understanding each other without words. The first few days without Rex had been unbearable. Mike had thrown himself into work, but nothing could fill the void his partner had left behind. Even now, he still heard Rex's bark in his head, still felt his presence beside him. And now, as he drove through the dark streets of Cedar Grove, with an injured dog and her puppies in the back, those memories of Rex came flooding back stronger than ever. He thought about how loyal Rex had been, how fiercely he had protected Mike, just like this mother dog was protecting her puppies. It was a bond that went beyond the physical world. It was love, pure and unconditional. Mike glanced in the rearview mirror, looking at the puppies curled up in the carrier and at their mother, whose gaze remained watchful and protective. For a moment, he wondered, would Rex have done the same if he were here? A small smile tugged at Mike's lips. He already knew the answer. In a way, Rex was still here, guiding him, reminding him of what true loyalty and love meant. Lost in thought, Mike carefully maneuvered the car toward the veterinary clinic, determined to get the mother dog and her puppies the help they needed. Though the urgency of the situation never left his mind, the weight of what had happened under the bridge still pressed down on him. This wasn't just a rescue. In the mother dog's eyes, he saw the same unwavering devotion he had once seen in Rex's. And that made him believe this was something bigger, something that felt like redemption. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel as the familiar road to Dr. Sarah Chun's clinic came into view. Mike had known her for years and trusted that she would do everything in her power to help these animals. But as the clinic lights appeared in the distance, doubt crept into his mind. This wasn't just about saving lives. It felt like a plea for help from a soul that understood the pain he carried. He had to make sure these animals got the care they needed, just as he would have done for Rex. Reaching for the radio on the dashboard, he pressed the button to request backup. His voice was calm, but the urgency in it was unmistakable. "Dispatcher, this is Officer Mike Thompson. I have an emergency. I'm en route to Dr. Chun's clinic with a severely injured dog and her 5 puppies. They need immediate assistance. Requesting animal rescue services and any available help." The radio crackled before a voice responded. "Copy that, Officer Thompson. Animal rescue services have been notified. Dr. Chun is ready to receive the animals. Stay safe." Mike nodded to himself, even though no one could see him. He knew the protocol. He knew the process. But this was different. This felt like more than just a rescue. He could feel it pressing against his chest. That heavy, unshakable feeling he hadn't felt in so long. Not since Rex. The road ahead seemed endless. But finally, Mike pulled up to the clinic. Bright lights illuminated the night, and the small sign reading Cedar Grove Veterinary Clinic stood like a beacon in the darkness. Dr. Chun was already outside, waiting. "Park over here," she called, her voice steady despite the seriousness of the situation. Mike opened the back door and carefully helped the injured mother dog out. Her movements were stiff, her body trembling with pain, but she never took her eyes off her puppies. She never left them, not even for a second. "I've never seen anything like this," Mike murmured, awe in his voice. "This dog, she's been through hell, but she's still here, still fighting for her puppies. She knows they're all that matters." Dr. Chun nodded, already beginning her examination. "Let's get her inside and on in 4. I need to sedate her to check for internal injuries." Mike gently lifted the puppies from the car one by one, cradling them in his arms. 5 tiny lives. "She did a good job protecting them," he said. As he followed Dr. Chun inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a rescue. Felt like healing, like redemption. Her eyes met his, filled with sympathy and sorrow. "Mike, she's a mother. She's not just physically wounded," Dr. Chun continued. "Something is happening to her emotionally. Something traumatic. The puppies, they're not hers." Mike blinked, stunned. His mind refused to process what he had just heard. He took a step back, trying to comprehend her words. "What do you mean? How are they not hers?" Dr. Chun hesitated, as if struggling with the weight of what she was about to say. "I've seen this before, in rescue cases. Mike, it's rare, but it happens," she said softly. She cared for these puppies as if they were her own, feeding them, protecting them, but she didn't give birth to them. Mike's mind raced through memories. He had seen the mother dog fiercely protecting the puppies under the bridge, shielding them from the cold and danger. The bond between them had seemed unmistakable. Then, who? His voice cracked as he searched for answers in Dr. Chun's eyes. "The puppies were abandoned, Mike," she explained gently. "Most likely, they were left in the trash or somewhere else. She found them and, driven by instinct, took them in as her own." Mike's breath caught, and for a moment, the world around him blurred. The revelation hit him harder than anything he had experienced that night. The mother dog wasn't their biological mother, but she had taken them in, cared for them, and loved them as if they were her own. She had done everything she could to protect them, just as Rex had once protected him. Mike took a shaky step back, his legs weak as the weight of the truth settled over him. The bond between the mother dog and the puppies was undeniable. Not one of biology, but of pure love, sacrifice, and desperation. A painful ache tightened in Mike's chest as reality became clear. This mother dog had given everything for these puppies, just as Rex had once given everything for him. This is so hard," Mike whispered, his voice trembling. "She's not even their real mother, but she did all this for them." Dr. Chun's face softened. "There is still room for love in this world. Unexpected, unexplainable love." And at that moment, Mike realized something. The pain of loss could one day give way to the healing power of new beginnings. Days passed since the heartbreaking revelation about the mother dog and her puppies, but Mike's thoughts kept returning to the moment Dr. Chun had explained the depth of their connection. Despite everything, the mother dog had accepted them, nurtured them, healed them, and protected them with unwavering devotion. It reminded Mike of how Rex had always cared for him. And for the first time in months, he felt something he thought he had lost: hope. He couldn't get the image out of his mind. The mother dog's eyes staring at him from under the bridge. Those eyes had seen not only pain but also love, courage, and survival. There was something incredible about her resilience, something that inspired Mike to believe that maybe, just maybe, he still had a chance to heal too. He had witnessed so much suffering over the years, but the strength of this dog made him wonder, was their meeting destined? When the initial shock and pain of her injuries subsided, Mike continued visiting the clinic daily, watching as the mother dog slowly recovered under Dr. Chun's care. The puppies grew stronger too. Their eyes began to open, and they started to move around in their enclosure. Their faint whimpers turned into playful yips as they wobbled around, exploring the world. Despite their early trauma, the mother dog's presence comforted them. They followed her everywhere, seeking her warmth and protection. One day, a week after they had been rescued, Mike arrived at the clinic and saw the mother dog sitting on her bedding. Her fur, now clean and well-groomed, still bore the marks of her hardships, but the wounds from the bridge had healed significantly. Though the past still weighed on her, there was now a lightness about her. She wagged her tail when she saw Mike. Her eyes were clear and alive, as if she had recognized him from the very first day they met. The puppies, now stronger and more energetic, rushed to the front of their enclosure to greet him, pressing against the bars in their eagerness. He knelt down, reaching out to them. The smallest puppy, a fluffy bundle of energy, licked his hand while the others tugged at his sleeve, demanding attention. Mike chuckled softly, a sound that felt almost foreign to him. It had been so long since he had laughed, genuinely, without the weight of grief. His gaze returned to the mother dog, and something in her eyes told him that she, too, was ready for a new beginning. Dr. Chun appeared in the doorway, smiling gently. "I think she's ready to leave the clinic," she said, her voice laced with quiet satisfaction. "She's recovering much faster than I expected." Mike looked at the mother dog again, his heart swelling with gratitude. "She's incredible," he whispered, not even realizing he had spoken aloud. Dr. Chun nodded as she approached the enclosure. "Yes, and most importantly, she's not done yet," she added. "She's taken on a new role, Mike. It's no longer just about survival. Now it's about healing." She became a mother to these puppies in a way no one could have predicted. She transformed from a wounded creature into a protector, a mentor, a leader. Mike felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the mother dog tenderly care for the puppies. She was no longer the broken, abandoned dog they had found under the bridge. She had become a symbol of strength, a beacon of love. She had embraced the role of a mother, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. And in doing so, she had healed herself. That day, Mike realized something profound. So consumed by his own grief, he hadn't noticed the power of transformation happening right before his eyes. This dog, who had been discarded and left under a bridge, had overcome every obstacle. She had become stronger, not just for herself, but for the puppies she had taken in. She had turned her pain into purpose, just like Rex once had. As Mike reached out to gently stroke one of the puppies, he felt a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. There was still much to do, to find a home for the mother dog and her puppies, to give them the future they deserved. But in his heart, for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. He was no longer alone, and maybe he thought neither was she. The mother dog looked at him, her eyes full of trust and quiet determination. In that moment, Mike understood something beyond words. They had both fought their own battles, but now they stood together at the threshold of something new. This was a new beginning, for her, for the puppies, and for Mike. And as the sun set behind the clinic, casting a golden glow over the scene, Mike knew one thing for sure: the healing had begun. This incredible story of resilience and transformation proves that even in the darkest moments, hope can light the way. Just as this mother dog overcame unthinkable hardships, we too can find the strength to face our challenges. If this story touched you, please like, share, and leave a comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts on this heartwarming tale of love, survival, and second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more inspiring stories. Together, we can spread hope and inspire others to believe in the power of healing. Thank you for being a part of this amazing community.